welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. Hey you guys, Courtney Fricke here. I'm excited today to showcase to you a little bit more, kind of pull back the curtain and share a little bit more about myself. And so in today's episode, I want to share you a little bit about my story in becoming an investor, about what path did I take to get where I'm at today. And then another part of that is I want to share to you my heart for this podcast and this YouTube channel. So make sure you tune in. I think you're going to enjoy it because not a lot of folks, get to kind of hear the backdrop, the background of what got someone somewhere. So tune in and take a listen. Thanks for joining. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in today to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm excited to bring this podcast venture to you. So I really wanted to start this off by sharing a few things with you. I wanted to share some things like, for example, I wanted to not only give you a little bit of my backstory, talk to you about my journey of being an investor, but I also want to share with you my heart around what I want to, to deliver to you with this podcast. So obviously I appreciate you guys joining in and tuning in and listening. So a little bit about me. So my background, so I'm based out of the greater New Orleans area. But my background is that I was born and raised here, right outside actually the suburbs of New Orleans, even though I don't have the accent. But my background was I didn't go to college. I actually went and did nonprofit work. I did missions work, and I lived overseas. I traveled to over 20 different countries, helping people in all different types of situations, everything from leper colonies to helping women find a trade, learn a trade outside of the being sex trafficked when they were rescued from that, cycling back into the industry, like into the workforce type of thing, and everything to orphanages and whatnot. So I did a lot of different things like that. Now whenever I got into real estate, so I got into real estate in 2014, I got in the industry, I stumbled into a job. Some of you have heard my story about the marina, and, I look back on it very fondly. So I moved back from Thailand. So I lived overseas in Thailand for a year. Back in 2013, I come back and, I was working a part-time job, and someone said, hey, you know what, you should go take my full-time job, which had benefits, and a salary. And so I really took that job because of that, but it was a job in the real estate industry. It was where I was going to be the assistant manager for a marina that was owned by an apartment complex corporation. So that's a big mouthful to say. It was a marina, a place where people, parked their boats, rented slips, they did all those things, but it was owned by, in front of the marina was a whole bunch of apartments. And the company that built those apartments was based out of California, and they owned apartment complexes all across America. So I took this job knowing that I was going to be an assistant. So I was assistant to the manager, the harbor master. And I asked my friend, I said, be straight up with me, what's the downfall of the job? He said, well, the manager has cancer. And so Mondays he goes and gets, radiation, and, you got to help him. So we do all that. I get the job. And day one, someone from corporate flies in to come do all my HR paperwork and to get me, get me suited into the job. Well, so I do that, and I remember that first day watching the guy from corporate. It was a guy, he had come out of Alabama to, from some of the apartment complexes over there. They had sent him to come as like a regional manager, regional director, to come do all my paperwork. And I watched him as he got the phone call when the manager, who was supposed to really do all of my training, because it was the only marina this apartment complex, corporation owned. And I remember when he got the phone call that the manager passed away my first day on the job, which is crazy, right? I often say that was baptism by fire, because I remember the guy looked at me, he said, well, that was going to be your trainer to learn how to, how to do the boat, how to deal with the boats, how to deal with the tenants, how to deal with all the stuff with the marina. He said, look, we only have apartments. We only deal in apartments. We don't really have a lot of involvement with the marina. So, but for years after that, managing that marina, it taught me a lot. I knew nothing about boats, but my parents had given me some great life lessons of like leaving things better than you find it. And so I just kind of took the next steps of saying, hey, how can I improve this marina? Day one, it was 40% occupied and it had a 1-star review. Rest in peace to the manager, but he wasn't the most friendliest guy. And so ultimately, I took on a job that I could have just coasted at, right? I could have just coasted and, watched movies in the office because I wasn't really micromanaged because, again, the closest manager I was going to have was going to be a few states over. But what I ultimately ended up doing was my goal was just, I want to figure it out. Let me figure out and see how I can improve it. So from there, I was able to, I started talking to the vendors. I started talking to the tenants and just saying, hey, give me some insights. Yeah, I know the manager passed away. I didn't get training from him, but I really just learned from the clientele, the vendors, and the paperwork in the office. And it took me 2 years, but I got that place 100% occupied. And also in doing some things, we ended up growing to 5-star reviews on all the sites that matter for boaters. And that was so huge that the president of the company that was based out of California, the apartment complex company that owned the marina, he reached out and he flew to Louisiana. And he's like, who are you? I want to get to know you. He said, do you want to travel to different locations? We've got apartment buildings that need, what you just did. Basically, I took a failing asset and I turned it around. And I didn't know what I was doing. I literally just was like curious enough and I wanted to leave it better than I found it. So I did that. And during that time, there was 2 tenants that really, really helped me. I was asking big questions. And a huge reason of why I got into real estate was because I didn't want to depend on the government. Here I am, we've got 100 units at the marina, 100 slips, and I'm watching people who are depending on the government for basically their monthly check. And they're having to live in, dilapidated boats and barely make ends meet because they were living on a fixed income. And I said, man, I don't want that. And, obviously there's a lot of concerns around in the future. Will Social Security be there? Things like that. I didn't want to depend on the government long term. At that time, I'm also being offered by my employer the ability to kind of, climb the ladder, if you will. And obviously it didn't come with a pension. Not a lot of jobs these days do, but I didn't want to also depend on my employer to be there for my future. And so when I got thinking about it, I ultimately said, I want to take responsibility for my retirement. I'm here. So in the boating world, you get a lot of people who are retired who have boats, right? And when I got to look at the different types of tenants at that marina, I ultimately said, I don't want to be like the guy who's, living on subsidies, fixed income, government assistance. I don't want to be like the people in the middle who are always working. They've made enough money they can buy a boat, so they've reached some level of status. But then those were the boats that would sink on me. Because these were wet slips where they stored the boat in the water. Because they didn't have time to come and take care of the boats, those things would sink. I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to work all the time and not be able to enjoy life, right? And then they had the other folks who either were high income earners or who had, retired with assets and they were not dependent on the government. They were not dependent, on working all the time. And those were the folks that I started asking questions of. So I have 2 tenants that taught me a lot. One was named Mr. Lee and one was named Charlie, Mr. Charlie. And they taught me so much. One of them, Lee, he was bringing a 50-foot power yacht to sell, probably $250,000. And I asked him, I said, hey, a running joke is that for boaters, the second best day of their life is when they sell. The first is when they buy it. The second is when they sell. And so I cracked the joke with him. He said, actually, no, I just put a 70-footer. And so I said, okay, well, tell me, do you mind if I ask? I'm asking these big questions. What am I going to do with my life? How am I going to build wealth so I don't have to depend on my employer for my retirement? I didn't want to be, dependent, right? So how can I build some independence? And so a huge part to that was I was starting to ask those questions. And when I saw that with Lee, I said, hey, you're obviously doing something right. And he said, oh, well, I'm a landlord, right? By being a landlord, I was able to afford, having these boats. It's not, there's a level there that I just was like, okay, really, I didn't expect that. So, he would start to leave me books at, there at the marina, and I would read them. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Actually, the Section 8 Bible. He would leave me those where it was just stories of landlords who, who were documenting their process. And so the other one is, there was a guy there who was a business owner who retired at 50, and he was able to go ahead and retire himself early. He bought a boat at my marina, and he was living there. We actually ended up making an offer on the marina together at one point, but he taught me a lot about valuation and thinking about money and leverage. He taught me a lot about, obviously having assets that are bringing in income, because that allowed him to retire at 50 years old from BP oil. And so there's a level that I was learning. So if you have a job, don't ever, underestimate the ability that you can walk away with some skill sets. But Charlie had said something really important. So obviously when I took the marina over, it was failing. It was 40% occupied, 1-star review. And then after a little while, it was 100% occupied and 5-star reviews, right? They immediately put the marina up for sale. And, I'm in hindsight, I'm not surprised. In the moment, I was not happy about it, right? Because I didn't know that that's how things worked, and that, when I took the job, they had tried to sell the marina multiple times, but couldn't because it was not performing. And nonetheless, when they put it up for sale, they were super happy because they now finally could. It was in better, performance. Charlie looked at me and he said, Courtney, if you can ever figure out how to do for yourself what you just did for your employer, you can make a lot of money. And in reading the books and understanding things, I said, okay, that's what I want to do. So during that time, I bought my first property. So I bought a condo. I inherited some money, not a lot. It was $40,000, which $40,000 is a lot, but it's not, go try to buy a property with it right now. It's not that easy. And so I bought a condo. And now this was a condo that, the guy was struggling financially. He was facing foreclosure. And ultimately, he was, the property was in disrepair. It was like a hoarder situation. It wasn't like a full gut or anything like that. But it had come on the market, and I knew at that point I didn't want to keep living at home. I didn't want to be the millennial living at home after, while having a job. So, but I didn't really have any credit. I couldn't qualify for a loan at that time. And so I was like, well, let me use this inheritance, a small inheritance. And so I bought this condo. It was a short sale, which means they had to negotiate with the bank to take less. But I bought it for $40,100. It was in a bidding war. I'm not going to lie, that $100 stressed me because I didn't know how high it would go. But then ultimately what I did was I renovated it. Now, it took me about 9 weeks to renovate it after hours. I was working 60 hours at the marina as the manager. And so after hours and on the weekends, I would go and my brother-in-law would show me how to lay flooring. I would, for 10% of it, and I laid the rest. Had an uncle come and show me how to, change out the fixtures. My dad helped me on a handful of things, like, fixing the water heater, or, we painted, changed out light fixtures. I just YouTubed how to do certain things. And so I upgraded. It was mostly cosmetics. But the reality was that I was able to do all of that on a Home Depot credit card, where they had a promotion that is, basically it was 2 years, same as cash, 0% interest if you paid it off. And so I put about $5,000 on that. And then I just used my work income and I paid that off. And over time, within that 2-year period. So I was $45,000 into this condo. And by the way, after those 9 weeks, I moved into it. So I treated it as a live-in flip. And at that time, I was making at the marina $25,000, $30,000 a year, which was chump change. And I wasn't properly compensated for what I was doing for them, but that was what I was paid. And I didn't know how to fight it properly. I didn't know how to educate my employer properly on the value I was bringing them. But I was making a small income. Well, during that time, because I had time on the job, I actually qualified for a home equity line of credit. So you remember I had an inheritance. So I had this condo free and clear because I bought it with cash, right? Even the $5,000 of renovations was a credit card. That's not tied to the property. And so then I went ahead and got a line of credit against the condo. Well, at that point, then it appraised for $85,000. And so I got a line of credit for 60 grand. And when I found out how much it appraised for, I was tickled pink. You know, the bug bit me. I said, okay, I just made more than my year's salary in just a little period of time. How can I do this again and again? And so during that time, though, my first few deals, I used that line of credit. So I was living in the condo, and I was using that line of credit. So I ended up giving my notice to leave the marina and go full time. And during that time, as soon as I left the marina, I went and bought another property. I found it direct to seller, bought it off of Craigslist. And so I bought another property to flip, but I used my line of credit. And so I didn't have a lot of money, right? I had to buy and renovate something for 60 grand. So I made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot. Ended up losing a little bit of money on that flip, but moved it along. But so during that time, my issue was access to capital. I had some, but not a lot. And so during that time, I had learned so my first deal was that live-in flip. My second was that flip. My third deal ended up being a wholesale deal. I was learning a lot at that point. And so I wholesaled the deal and I made $7,500 wholesaling. And I said, okay, there's something to this. At this point, I had left the marina and I needed to replace my income, right? Because I had left my job. And so wholesaling allowed me to put food on the table because my flips were taking 6 months, from the purchase to the end of the sale. And yeah, it's great when you get the payday. I didn't get a payday on the first one, and at this point I was blowing through my savings that I had built in so that when I was ready to leave the job. I'd started flipping and that's when I had gotten into wholesaling. So I effectively started growing my wholesale business at that point. I was focused on the suburbs, the North Shore of New Orleans, and I started doing consistent wholesale deals. And then at that point, I'd started learning how to get short-term private money from individuals. So, and that's when I started buying properties to take down and do more flips, but then I had more than just that line of credit. So with my line of credit and some private money, I was able to start buying some more deals to flip. So I was wholesaling and flipping, and I got on a roll. And I started doing volume, really, mastering that trade. But a few years go in, and I just realized that I got into real estate because of its ability to build wealth. And I was focusing on the salary part. I was focusing on the turn and burn, the quick money, the today money, when in reality I was in it for what the long term, what I could build out over the long term. And I realized I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't keeping any of these properties. There was one particular property that I got it under contract at such a great deal. And honestly, this is a property that should be in my rental portfolio today, but it's not. I did not know how to get long-term private money. I did not know how to get anything past like a 12-month period. And so I couldn't keep it as a rental. So I ended up wholesaling. I still made money on it. But in hindsight, it was because my skills were limited. And so the deals, I always say the deals you do are directly, they're in direct relation to your skill sets today. So because I didn't have those skill sets, whether that was creative financing or long-term private money or other ways to finance a deal, that limited me to the deals that I was doing at that time. But that one deal, yes, I made that short-term money, but I said, okay, this made me mad enough. I want to go learn how to do so I can actually next time take it down and keep it as a rental. And so during that time, I learned a lot about creative financing and long-term private money. So everyday individuals who would come in and finance the deals for me for more than just 6 months or 12 months, right? And so my goal with that was to be able to start holding rentals, right? Building, yes, I was still flipping and wholesaling, but I wanted to keep, certain properties that fit a certain criteria so that I could keep them long-term, to build wealth, right? For my tomorrow, right? That, originally I feared, would Social Security be there? Obviously I didn't have a job where there was going to be a pension or a 401k. And so I wanted to say, hey, I want to build towards tomorrow. And so that led me to starting to buy rentals again with the creative financing or private money. And then ultimately, yes, I was still flipping and wholesaling some, but I've grown to where the majority of what I do is the buy and hold stuff now. Hey friends, Courtney Fricke here. A lot of you know me as a solutions-based real estate investor that's located, and I do business in Southeast Louisiana and South Mississippi. Maybe you specifically have a property that you want me to make an offer on. Maybe you are a property owner yourself. Maybe you are an investor and a deal has gone south, or you just want another investor to make an offer on it because maybe you want to get out of the business, whatever that looks like. Or you're a professional and you say, hey, Courtney, I have a client that I think you'd be a good fit for. You're an agent, lender, attorney, you name it. If you go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney, if you fill out that link, my team, you see them working back here, they'll get back to you as soon as possible and we will get you an offer on your property. We're here to help you guys. Reach out. Yes, I might still do some of those here and there, but my main focus is, a lot of tomorrow money, but at the same time, I'll just have little pockets of today money that come in. And ultimately, along the way, there's been a few things that have been big milestones for me. So, of course, that's a little bit of my history as an investor. But 6-7 years ago, I realized there weren't a lot of people in my market like getting together and meeting. I was trying to find where were the meetups, the RIAs. And, there was one that was in New Orleans, but it was one that a lot of people just said, I don't really go there anymore. Because they just had a different model. It was where there was traveling speakers who would come and sell a course. Not a wrong thing, not a bad thing. I had at that point had bought courses, but ultimately, a lot of people didn't go to those meetings because they didn't want to get sold to, right? So, but I wanted to go to the place. I wanted to go get around other people. There was one nearby, but it just wasn't consistent. So ultimately, I ended up starting the North Shore RIA. So the real estate investor meetup, based out of, originally it was in Slidell, then it moved to Covington. I started that in 2018, and that is something that I'm very proud of how it grew, all of that. I actually just recently, just a few months ago, gave that, passed it on to Cole Fricke. He now runs and facilitates it. But that was something, I grew because I wanted to build a platform where people would come and talk, so I could learn from them, right? The speakers. I wanted it to be an opportunity in which, I could have other people in the room so I can get to know other investors, right? It was as if I wanted to build my own networking group, right? So that was a huge part for me over the years. I'm so thankful for all the speakers. I'm so thankful for all the people I've met through it. Some of the people I'll have on this podcast are people that I've met from hosting that, from, networking at those. But that was something that was a huge milestone in my career. It connected me to a lot of folks. I've met business partners, more private money lenders. I've bought deals in those rooms. Those things are huge, right? But then over time, through that, I ended up actually meeting a gentleman, and I didn't know who he was. And him and his wife had some questions about, they were trying to work some deals with their kids. And so he had some questions, and I was able to go ahead and just help him. And similar to my background in the nonprofit world, similar to the time at the marina, I just wanted to leave people better than I find it. And so with him, I just said, hey, here, let me help you in the way I can help you. And he ended up coming back to me, and he was attending some of the investor meetups with the RIA. And he eventually pulled me aside. He said, I don't know if you know this, but I'm on the radio every weekend. Some of you may know him. It's Paul LaGrange. He is on the Home Improvement Show. So WWL, 870 AM, which is, by the way, one of 30 very large range radio stations in the country. So the government created 30 large range, radio stations. So in the case of like the Civil War, not the Civil War, the Cold War, that they could use as an alert system. And so basically it's based out of New Orleans, but it goes, all the way up to Baton Rouge and beyond, but it goes all the way to the Florida Panhandle as well, and into some of Texas. But after Katrina, they came to him at WWL, came to Paul, because he was a contractor and a building science expert and said, hey, can you help the city rebuild? Well, what they did was they started the Home Improvement Show, which is a live call-in radio show every Saturday for 2 hours, where folks would call in saying, hey, I've got, my floor is buckling. What do I do? Who do I hire? How can I fix this? Or, hey, I hired a contractor, but he ran away. What do I do? So various things like that, right? It's everything from do it yourself to hiring contractors to just general maintenance and repair stuff. But I met Paul and he came up to me and said, Courtney, I've been looking for someone for years who can answer all the real estate questions that I get. And he said, I'd looked at a handful of real estate agents, but they were all very focused on, a limited purview. But he said, I've found that with your experience, you've dealt with all different types of transactions that I think you would be a good fit. And so he invited me on, and so I've been on the air for a number of years now. So each weekend on WWL, Paul answers all the home improvement questions. I answer all of the real estate questions. And so it keeps me on my toes. I never know what people are going to call and ask about, whether it's a tenant asking questions, a landlord or a homeowner, someone with an inherited property, land, commercial, residential, you name it. So that keeps me on my toes, but I thoroughly enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy being able to help the public. There's various things I've gotten to do over my career in that sense. Yes, I was able to help that. With that, I'm able to help the community, but I'm also able to, there's other avenues in which I'm able to help other investors. So with the real estate investor meetup, I was able to help the investor community, but through that, I actually started meeting a lot of real estate agents and brokers, and had the chance to start doing trainings at local brokerages. Hey, Courtney, you've got the RIA. Can you come and share about working with investors or about one of the deals you've done or things like that? And so I started doing that. I started speaking at brokerages, 6-7 years ago, maybe even more than that. And now it's a heavy part of what I do. I'm not CE certified. Maybe I'll say yet, but I don't know if I want to go through all that red tape. But I frequently teach on classes. I teach on the foreclosure process in Louisiana because I've been working with pre-foreclosures for 10 years now. I teach on, things like creative financing because about 80-90% of the deals I do right now are creative financing, seller finance, subject to things like that. So there's a lot that I do with agents. I myself am not licensed. I just do a lot of business with them. And so even on the education side. And so those are all things that I've been very proud of. Everything from, for years I wrote articles for the Real Producers, the New Orleans Real Producers magazine, which went to the top 500 producing agents. And I wrote them articles about investing or working with distressed seller situations. And so, with that being said, I'm thankful for what's happened over the years. I've consistently done different types of deals, everything from my favorite is single family homes, but I've done everything with land, from land to mobile homes on land. I've done mobile home parks, RV parks, apartment complexes, hotels. I did a hotel and a motel. And then the reality is I've also done it at a lot of different price points. And yes, I've flipped, I've wholesaled, I've had rentals. I have one furnished rental. It's not short term, it's a midterm rental. And I've also done a lot with solving bad title issues. So as a creative investor, I like to go toward the sticky stuff, right? And ultimately, this is a lot of my story of where I'm at today. I predominantly have rentals in Louisiana, South Louisiana, and South Mississippi. My preference is A and B class single family homes. And that's come from years of getting clarity of what I want. A lot of investors I've learned through the real estate investor meetup, through various things, they often don't know what they want. And so now let's talk to you. That's a little bit about me. That's the, the long story of a little bit about me. But let's talk to you about what I want to do with this podcast. What's my goal here? And so obviously with the podcast and the YouTube channel, my heart here is to bring you guys into conversations. See, there's a lot of people who are not social media savvy. They're not, they're not braggadocious. They're not vocal, but they're very experienced. My top 5 mentors are what I call gray-haired men. One of them's no longer with us, and you will surely hear me talk about him a lot. But all of those guys don't really have a social media account. Most of them are in their 70s. They're not really active, but they have done thousands of deals. And so a lot of this will be conversations with people who don't really have social media followings. Another is, I want to have conversations about, sure, some of their story of why they did, why did they zig or zag? But another part of that is really, why are they in, for example, me, single family homes? Why are they in self-storage? Why do they have a wholesaling company and, rentals? Why are they in the New Orleans market? Why are they in the Tampa market? Why are they in the part of that is here with the Strategic Success podcast, I want to have conversations around taking the next right step. And maybe that's the next right step today, talking about things that are changing in the market, or maybe that's talking about their journey. Either way, my goal here is just to elevate the conversations and invite you into some conversations that I have been privileged to have for years. But it's people who, again, they're not going to have their own podcast. They're not going to have their own social media. And I want to encourage you to really think about your philosophy. Your philosophy with real estate, your philosophy with business, and your philosophy with money. Because at the end of the day, that is what shapes us, right? It's the people who shape us, and it's our beliefs. And so that's a lot of what I want to bring to you guys. So here's one more thing that I have for you. Tune in. Obviously, I'm going to encourage you to like and subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next episodes are out. But I want to hear your feedback too. I don't want this to be one-sided. Of course, I'm going to have conversations with guests, but I want to have conversations with you as well, because that'll help inform me on who to bring on, or, hey, do I dig deeper into certain topics? So I'm going to invite your feedback. So you can either shoot me a DM on Instagram, or you can send me, put in the comments, send me your feedback that way. But here's one other thing I want to do. So a lot of people say, hey, Courtney, I want to pick your brain, right? Gotta love it, but someone somewhere along the line told people, go start telling successful people, or people that you deem successful, I want to pick your brain. So what I want to do here is, for every person who's like, hey, Courtney, I want to pick your brain, this is going to be my challenge to you. First of all, I'm going to show you this book. This is my personal library. I'm an avid reader. This is the #1 book that I recommend other people to read about real estate. So it's real estate specific. So John Schaub, he wrote this book. It's called Building Wealth One House at a Time. This is the original version. I think they're on the 3rd edition at this point. But Building Wealth One House at a Time by John Schaub is, again, the #1 book that I tell people to go listen to. You listen to it, you read it, whatever that looks like for you. But I'm a huge fan of this book. Most people, they pick Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But I say, I'm not going to say throw it out, because it has some value to it. But this book has a lot of great insights. John is one of the top 5 mentors in my investing career. So I really appreciate his insights and everything along those lines. So first of all, I'm going to encourage you, I don't care if you rent it from the library, go find it on YouTube to listen to if you even can. Get it from Audible, buy it online. You can probably buy it for $4 plus shipping on eBay. So it's not a lot of money, but I would encourage you to go buy this and read this. And then come to me with some, you can direct message me some questions. But for years, people say, hey, can we go have coffee? Can we go have lunch? Can I pick your brain? And oftentimes I've found that has been aimless, right? It's aimless conversations. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to say, hey, if you're trying to get into real estate, start here, right? Start here. Do a little digging on your own first, and then come to me with some calculated questions. The second thing I'm going to say to you is that I build into my schedule a few things. One of them, it's the greater New Orleans and even into Mississippi, the real estate investor meetups. I attend them often. I'm not always at them. Sometimes I'm traveling, but I frequently attend them. If you come to them, A lot of times they have a meeting after the meeting at like a restaurant or a bar. I'll go to those as well. Come there and hang out with me. That's where you can pick my brain. Absolutely. If I'm there, you come and talk to me, I will sit down and talk with you. Free of charge, right? There's a level there that I build that into my calendar. So I'm going to ask you to say, hey, if that's what you want to do, come to these meetups, right? Come meet me there. Hey, even message me, hey, Courtney, will you be at this month's West Bank meetup or the North Shore RIA? I'll let you know, yeah, it's on my schedule to come, or hey, no, I'll be out of town that week, but I will be at the following one, or I'll be at the one that's, at this location at the next place. And that's where I'm happy to chat with you. The other part of that is I do build into my schedule time to do this, the podcast, the YouTube channel, but also my Instagram, my Facebook, so the social media stuff. That is another way to, first of all, you can learn from me from there. And you can then go ahead and, you can shoot me a message, and I'll do my best to respond to messages in a timely manner, but also to a degree in which I can get back to you, right? But ultimately, those are some of the ways I'm going to encourage you. Again, the pick my brain concept, the goal is here are some things that I already have available for you. So go subscribe to my YouTube channel, watch those videos. Follow along on Instagram to I post more than once a day a lot of times, but for sure daily content that you can learn from, right? And I do my best in, the local investor meetups to interact with folks and answer questions. So those are all really great. And a handful of times a year, I'm not a mentor for hire. Now, what I will do is a few times a year throughout, I might do a weekend workshop, and that's where I really pour myself in and, spend 2-3 days with you and other folks doing a workshop. Those are great opportunities. Now that is paid. I get told all the time that I undercharge for it because I do believe in over giving. So those are some opportunities. But then lastly, I generally do a deal with me. Bring a deal to me. Maybe you can bring some capital on a deal. That is where I'm happy to give some one-on-one attention. The only thing that I will, joint venture on a deal with is a wholesale deal in the greater New Orleans, maybe Baton Rouge or South Mississippi markets. But generally speaking, those are some of the things I want to encourage you towards. So, but all of that, guys, I'm thankful that you're tuning in. I'm thankful that, it does not go unnoticed when you say, hey, Courtney, I do value your opinion. I want to pick your brain. I understand the respect tied to that. I'm just going to build in some boundaries of what that could look like, right? Because I'm getting to the point where we're traveling more. I'm wanting to, the years that I spent investing into my business and my portfolios, I'm wanting to enjoy some of that time freedom. So I don't always necessarily have the time, but here are the opportunities that I am saying I do have the time, or the avenues in which you can, pick my brain or have some one-on-one time, or, at a meetup, we can connect. I can answer your questions. I'm more than happy to help. And I hope that becomes abundantly clear to you. So with that being said, you guys can always connect further with me at CourtneyFricke.com. That just has a lot of links of what's going on, whether that is my monthly newsletter you can sign up for, my social media channels, or even some videos that I've highlighted that are a good starting point. For example, I have on there conversations around, getting started investing in real estate. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope to bring you a ton of value. If you've been following me for more than a minute, I believe I consistently show up in that and providing you a lot of value. So thanks so much for tuning in today, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can continue to tune in for these future conversations that I'm very excited to bring to you guys. Thanks so much.